Thanks, worship team. Appreciate you. If you have your Bibles with you this morning, turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. This is what is known as, of course, as the love chapter, but I just want to focus on a couple verses this morning. Look down at verse 4. And it says, "Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It does not self-seek. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres." God's love is something different than human love. Human love is not always faithful. Human love does not always go the distance. God's love is something entirely different. In 1 John chapter 4, verse 7 and 8, it says, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love." And so in order to love like we should, then we need God's love. Human love always falls short. And so what is God's love like? He describes this here in Corinthians chapter 4 and describes the different aspects of love. And so you can see how you measure up to the love of God that he wants us to have by placing your name in the place of love. So you would put Tim is patient, Tim is kind, or if that would be for you. Each one of us would put our name in there, or even better yet, ask your spouse or your children to rate how you measure up. You can put Jesus' name into every single one of those because he fills every attribute of love perfectly. And so I want to focus on just one of those this morning. Love is kind. Jesus is kind. We often think of that particular word as being the opposite of being mean. We are taught to be kind to those who are kind to us. Those things are helpful, but this word goes so much further than just the opposite of being mean. Kindness here in this reference refers to an act of grace. The kindness here has nothing to do with whether or not someone has been kind to you. The word means to act in kindness even when the person doesn't deserve it. Luke chapter 6, verse 35, and Jesus said this, "But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked." He's kind to the wicked and to those that don't even appreciate what he has done for them. I've known people over the years that God has miraculously healed. Some of them from death sentences. God has healed them, and they don't even appreciate what the Lord has done for them, and they don't even serve him after he has miraculously healed them. And so the Lord is kind to those who are not kind even in return. It is an act of grace. The person has done nothing good to deserve his kindness, yet he is still kind to them. Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 17, and this is quoting from the New King James Version, but it says, "You are God, ready to pardon, gracious and merciful, slow to anger, abundant in kindness." And so Jesus was kind even when he was being mistreated. When he was on the cross, he was still kind. Kindness is often translated in the Word of God by just simply the word love. And so Psalm 63:3 says, "Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you." And the word translated love there is the word loving kindness. You remember in the fruit of the Spirit that's listed in Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, we talk about there that there are 9 fruit of the Spirit. And you will notice that the word there is singular. The word fruit is singular. Whenever you have a plural noun, you remember in English, you have to have a plural verb. The verb there is. It's singular. So the fruit of the Spirit is There's only one fruit of the Spirit. It is love. All the other things that follow are attributes of love. And so the other words describe what love is: joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Those are all attributes of what love is. So God is love, and one of the words that describe that kind of love, God's love, is the word kindness. Look at 2 Samuel chapter 9. 2 Samuel chapter 9. We were going over this just a couple of Wednesday nights ago, and you remember the story of David, and David was tending sheep, his father's sheep. He was tending those sheep, and so his father asked him to go out and bring food to his brothers. The brothers are in a standoff with the Philistine army, and a giant by the name of Goliath, is standing between the two armies, and he's taunting the armies of the living God. And so David goes out there, and he sees all of this going on, and everyone on Israel's side there is afraid to do anything about it. And so David speaks up, and he says, you know what? There is a cause. This is something worth fighting for. Let's go out there and take this giant down. And he volunteers to do that, and of course, as soon as he volunteers, his brothers get mad at him. You know, you ought to be back tending the sheep, you little twerp, instead of out here trying to show off how big you are. There's jealousy that arises right from the very beginning. So David, he tells King Saul, I'll be willing to go out and fight the guy, and King Saul is more than happy to have him go out there. He puts on his armor, and David tries the armor on. He goes, no, this just doesn't fit me. This isn't what I'm used to. And so he goes and he finds 5 smooth stones. He goes out to meet the giant, and he takes him down with the first stone. Kills him, cuts off his head. Of course, now David he's in hero status now, and so they're singing songs about Saul whenever he would come back from war, and they would say, King Saul has slain his thousands, but David his 10,000s. And something enters into the heart of King Saul there that is jealous of what David has done. And so he's watching out for him, and that's building inside of him. That jealousy keeps rising inside of his heart. And so he's looking for opportunities really to do David in, not to help him. And finally it comes to the place where when David is playing the harp for King Saul throws a spear at him. He wants rid of him. And so David ends up for months and months and into the years of running from Saul, hiding out with his own men, 600 of his own men, and hiding out from Saul over and over again as Saul pursues him with 3,000 troops. King Saul is wanting to kill David. David, of course, has a couple of opportunities to kill Saul, and he doesn't lay a hand on God's anointed. Still, that doesn't stop Saul from doing what he wants to do. The jealousy is inside of him. He is determined to rid David. But David and King Saul's son, Jonathan, they have a very special friendship with each other. And so whenever the Philistines end up attacking Israel, King Saul and his sons were put to death by the Philistines. And so when David became king, he's looking for a way to show kindness to the house of Saul for Jonathan's sake. So let's look at chapter 9, 2 Samuel, and begin there with verse 1. And David asked, is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? Now, the whole practice in those days was that whenever a new king came to power, the former king, if he wasn't already dead, and his family were entirely wiped out. Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, are you Ziba? At your service, he replied. The king asked, is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness? Ziba answered the king, there is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet. Where is he? The king asked. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Ammiel, in Lodabar." So King David had him brought from Lodabar, from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, "Mephibosheth, at your service," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. And so as David is looking for a way to show kindness to the house of Saul for Jonathan's sake, he ends up finding this son of Jonathan whose name was Mephibosheth. Now, he was crippled in both feet, and that happened because the nurse that was carrying him when he was young fell and dropped him, and he became crippled in both feet because of that accident. She was running away for their very lives. She was trying to save Mephibosheth from being wiped out. And so he ends up crippled in both of his feet. And David says to him, "I want you to come and spend your entire rest of your life with me in the palace, eating at my table." One of the verses, verse 1, uses that word kindness. And this is, as I said before, is not human kindness. This is God's kindness. The Hebrew word that is used is hesed. It literally means royal love. And so the same word is also used in the book of Hosea. God uses Hosea's marriage to Gomer as an example of his love for Israel. You remember Gomer had been unfaithful, had been with other men over and over again. She had borne children to those other men, and yet Hosea loved her so much that he kept taking her back. He even purchased her one time when she was sold into slavery. Israel, of course, the whole story was referring to, Israel had been unfaithful to the Lord over and over again. They had prostituted themselves with idols. They had forgotten the one true God. And after all that Israel had done, all of the idolatry and everything that was going on with Israel, God still loved them. And he says this in Hosea chapter 2, verse 19. He says, "I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you in righteousness and justice, in love and compassion. I will betroth you in faithfulness, and you will acknowledge the Lord." And so the very same word love that in that verse is also the same word translated kindness in 2 Samuel, the exact same word. And so it is a love that keeps expressing itself in kindness over and over again. Doesn't quit, doesn't give up, doesn't even have to have it returned. It's not the kind of kindness that someone deserves even. It is given simply because it is God's kindness. And so Jonathan had been dead for a number of years at this point, but David wanted to still find ways to be kind to him. The story is also told, and the same word is used again in the story of Ruth. Boaz kept showing kindness to Ruth over and over again. And Ruth's mother-in-law says about Boaz in Ruth chapter 2, verse 20, "He has not stopped showing kindness to the living and the dead." So the Lord's kindness never fails. It continues on. And we sing so many different songs about his loving kindness, how it is better even than life. The Lord's kindness never fails. we grow weary of showing kindness as on our part if they're not returned in the human kindness. But the kindness of God continues to show kindness even when it's not appreciated, even when it's not returned. I think of all the things that the Lord has been kind to me in so many different ways, and in my family, my wife, and my kids, and my son-in-laws. I've been blessed over and over again. Just recently, I've told you, in an accident, a head-on accident, there could have been so much worse, and the Lord was kind. And so he's blessed me in so many different ways. The church that I get to pastor here at Praise, what a blessing you are, your family to us. The Lord has been so kind to me over and over again. But the Lord also, because of his kindness that comes to us, wants us to be kind to others. And so the Lord and the love of God is expressed through us in the very attribute of kindness. I'm reminded of the parable about lost things, and he tells three different stories with that. Is the parable of the lost coin, the parable of the lost sheep, and the parable of the prodigal son. But in the parable of the lost sheep, the sheep were lost through the carelessness of others. And I've thought about that, and I shared with you my story last week about the woman that had really come down and got all over me when I was at the altar one Sunday night. And some people have grown up under legalism, and legalism promises life, but it actually ends up producing the opposite. It produces death. And because it creates a standard that no one can live up to, no one can attain to. And so it often makes people angry and mean and self-righteous. And many people have been lost by the carelessness of others that have been in contact with those people that are angry in the church. And so many people have had a bad attitude against the church because of maybe the meanness of somebody else who thought necessarily that they were doing God a favor. Well-intentioned maybe, but they ended up causing hurt to somebody else because of thinking that this is the correct way that we follow in holiness. And it's not holiness at all. It's simply the traditions and standards of men. I was watching, there was a girl that I graduated with in 1977, and I'm friends with her on Facebook, and I see her posts, and she's constantly angry at the church. I mean, constantly. She thinks, she puts every post on there that says something derogatory about Christianity or the church or anything like that. She posts it on Facebook over and over again. And it's probably because she encountered something early on in life of something that was angry towards her, legalism or whatever it was, and now she's decided that she's going to come out and attack the church in every way that she possibly can. She went to a Christian high school. She had every opportunity to know the Lord. Yet there's just something inside of her that is absolutely angry because of what somebody did to her. And so Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32 says, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as in Christ God forgave you." Why should we be kind? Because he forgave us. He was kind towards us. We should be kind and compassionate to one another.